Hi, this is Gurasi Singh, and you're listening to my Thick Accent podcast. Before we get into today's episode, I want to discuss a few housekeeping items. First, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please consider doing it. Podcast production is not easy, it requires a lot of time and effort, and we can continue only and only with your support. And second, if you would like to share your immigrant story or know somebody I should invite next to the podcast, please reach out to us at hello@mythickaccent.com, or you can also DM us on Instagram. The handle is mythickaccent. Now let's get to the episode. So for the ones in North America, after the daylight saving time ends on first Sunday of November every year, we're always surprised how much difference 1 hour makes. And we hate it when it gets dark at 4:30 p.m. But there are places in Canada where in winters, sun rises at 11 a.m. and sets at 4 p.m. Yes, just 5 hours of daylight. And my guest today lives in one such province. She moved out of her house at the age of 21 after her bachelors. She lived in Singapore for some time to complete her Masters of Science in Applied Economics and later moved to Canada in 2019 with the permanent residency. And now she works for the Government of Yukon as a fiscal economist. She also loves running marathons and has won accolades in the same. So let's learn more from her about her journey of running from her house, not literally, to setting her camp at Yukon, Canada. Please welcome Khushboo Aggarwal.
Hi, good to see you from Whitehorse.
So how are you, Khushboo?
All good. Think getting used to the daylight, the shorter daylights here. That's definitely a big challenge, but it's great. It's really bright out now. It's 11:30 here now, so it's getting better and brighter.
But yeah, Khushboo, just 5 hours of daylight, right? It always happens when something is in abundance, we never value it much. But we never realize in India, for example, how much of an impact sunlight has on someone's health, right?
I never thought I would crave for sunlight. Coming from Delhi, where there's abundance of sunlight, you're running away from
Exactly,
it.
yeah.
Life has come a full circle. Yeah.
So how do you guys manage in terms of your work? Like you never see the sunlight, like you leave at I don't know 8 or 10 and it's like you left the house in dark and you're coming back when it's dark, right?
It's literally that. I'm still getting used to it, but surprisingly, life doesn't stop. I look outside my window from my bed at 8. The cars are coming in because I live in downtown and that's where most of the businesses are. You look
Hmm.
outside, it's dark. It's like 2 a.m. and the cars are in full swing, like regular work day. Nothing stops. It's minus 30, minus 40. Everybody makes it to work
Hmm.
regardless.
Yeah, I think that's how Canada is. No matter what the weather is, it continues, moving. Yeah. So since Hushbu, we are in the last month of the year 2022, let me start by asking you what is something you are most grateful for in the year 2022?
It definitely has to be taking the plunge to move to the Yukon. It has been a life
Hmm.
changing decision. Absolutely. Yes. When I first moved to Canada, I was in Mississauga for the most part. And I remember feeling like I've moved to a heaven, like moving from
Hmm.
Delhi. And then I moved to the Yukon. I was like, no, this is what heaven is. Mississauga wasn't.
Right.
So it's untouched. It's pure beauty. There's just 40,000 people, and Yukon is huge, but the population density is really low. So everything is pretty untouched. You go wherever, you might just find one person, or no,
Hmm.
or none at all. So it spoils you, yeah. But definitely, that's one thing that I'm really grateful for.
Wow, that's amazing. Actually, I have personally never met anybody who is from Yukon or somebody who moved to Yukon. This is for the first time I'm speaking to somebody from Yukon. So I would like to learn more about it. But before we dive deeper into that, let's just talk about the time you spent in India. You were born there, you were born in Delhi, Noida. And I'm aware you were also telling me that you were always a rebellious kid and you wanted to be the guy of the house because it comes with more freedom. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's funny, but growing up, I used to play with my brother's friends because it just came with a lot of freedom, and I always wanted to be like the guy, and that has a part to play in me being kind of tomboyish as I grew up, and even now in my personality. But definitely, yeah, I felt like my brother being young, despite being younger than me, always had kind of more freedom and less
Hmm.
restrictions per se. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I always wanted to do things that guys are expected to do. Wanted to drive really early. Wanted to it yeah, and then I moved here, and I felt like all those battles that I was trying to fight in India,
Hmm.
everybody pretty much did it here, regardless of the gender. But like I came here, I got my license, and I remember driving U-Haul for the first time and helping my friends move because they didn't have
Hmm.
license at that
Okay.
time. And I felt really accomplished because that's all I wanted to do all my life, like do things that guys do.
I've actually heard it from my female friends as well. They say the same, that our brothers being younger, they get to do things which we are asked not to do all the time. And they also
Yeah.
get a little rebellious at times. And they said, if he's allowed to go at night with his friends, why aren't we allowed to go out?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I understand where our parents came from. And
Yeah.
ever since I moved here and my parents saw me grow, they have been all supportive. And my dad often says, like, you're the son, you're our son, and I feel so proud. But yeah, I want to be the daughter and still feel proud. But I
Yeah.
get it where they come from. Yeah.
So I also remember you mentioning that, in high school you were a topper, but directionless. And I was a little shocked that what? And then you said you built a passion for economics during your bachelor's, even though you were not sure you want to get into that. Tell us about that.
It's very interesting. Like there was this one time I was in grade 12. Me and my best friend, we had just gone out like after our tuition and just hanging out. And she's like, "So what are you thinking of doing? What entrance exams are you going to give?" She always knew she wanted to be a lawyer.
Hmm.
And I was like, you know what? My immediate goal is just to get good grades in my 12th board, and that's it. And I'll see after that. And then she's like, "Khushboo, I'm really surprised. You always have been a topper, but you're so directionless." And I was like, that is, yeah, it was like a point of reflection for me. But that's absolutely true. I always used to work for my immediate goals, and I still do, kind of, I feel. And that at that point all my energy was just into getting good grades, and I got good grades. I chose the best course from Delhi University because economics honors always has the highest cutoff. And it was
Mhm.
only after I got myself into my bachelor's degrees when I felt like I really loved the subject, and then I went on to do a master's in it, and now I work as an economist. It's my dream job. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's how the journey has been.
Okay, and then you decided to move to Singapore to do your master's in applied economics. So what tell me, this was also the first time you moved out of your home country, moved out of your house. So tell us what was going on in your mind and also about the experience living in Singapore.
I come from a middle class family, and I was the first one to have left the house. And being a girl, definitely, because for us, it's an accolade to have an education and not so much
Mhm.
about making a career and all being ambitious, right? So it did not come without its struggles and me trying to convince my parents
Mhm.
that it's definitely going to be a good decision and good investment. Please send me, and I'm going to do great. So I did have a good track record for sure, like in terms of my grades and
Mhm.
stuff. So it wasn't
Yeah.
difficult to convince them. Um, I always showed passion for studies and education, so my dad kind of felt like I was a good bet to put money in. So I did.
Mhm.
I chose Singapore because it was close to India and has a good reputation in terms of education too. I did get into some universities in the UK, but didn't take that up as of then. But turned out to be a good decision. I did a year long degree there, and then I worked there for a couple years too before I moved back to India again.
And then that is where you also started running marathons.
Oh, yes, that's what happened. So in Singapore, interestingly enough, it's a very young population, right? Every second person has ran a full marathon, and it's comes with no pride. It's just a matter of physical attributes. Like everybody has run a
Mhm.
marathon. And that's what happened. So I was there. My colleagues just signed me up for a half marathon, which is 21
Mhm.
kilometers straight away. I have never run,
Hmm.
even ran a kilometer on the road. And that marathon was a couple months away. So we used to go for trainings, did hardcore training. Uh, used to go for runs after work, like at least thrice or four times a week. We were
Mhm.
all in the same office. It was easy to plan that ways. And then, yeah, I ended up running my first marathon and second in Singapore.
Okay, so why did you decide to come back? I remember you mentioned there were like some visa situations and something happened that in Singapore that you had to come back. Educate us that what are some of those challenges in terms of visa process that can come that to the point where coming back is the only option. Tell us about that.
So I was working for a very mid-sized company, and I was looking for a career progression, and I was interviewing. So the visa there works very similar to how it works in the US. Every company sponsors you. So when you get a work permit, you can only work for the company that has sponsored you, right?
Okay.
I was giving interviews, and I wanted to get another job before I gave up on the current job because that's the only way to continue residing in Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
And I did get an offer from a very promising company, very definitely a promoted role. So I gave resignation in my current company, and then I thought there'd be no issues with them applying for my visa. So I come back to India for vacation, waiting for
Mm-hmm.
them to apply. Then they applied and it got rejected. They applied with a higher salary. It got rejected again. So there's this like they don't give you a whole lot of details when they reject the visa,
Mm-hmm.
but they do say that like for certain industries they prefer having domestic workers over foreigners, and there's also a certain percentage that they're not listed anywhere like legally, but it's something that happens implicitly in the system,
Okay.
where for dedicated industries they have like a certain proportion attributed to each of those industries. Like for say shipping industry can only have 5% foreign workforce in the
Mm-hmm.
company, that kind of thing. So it didn't work out. It was pretty unfortunate. I waited 6 months because each application took like a month and a half to process, and they applied three times with different profiles. Like they even increased my salary 100%. And they said
Mm-hmm.
they would not give me any promotion for the next 2 years, but they're going to apply with an increased salary. But that didn't work out either. So yeah, I stayed in India.
So the thing is that to stay in Singapore, you have to have a job going on.
That's correct. So you can either be on a student permit,
Mm-hmm.
which expired as soon as I graduated. It gives you additional
Okay.
months, a few
Okay.
additional months in case you're not able to clear your course. They give you a couple extra months from the stipulated time of your degree completion.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get a job, your company sponsors your work permit. You have to give up your student permit and then you hold that work permit, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you resign from that job, you have to surrender that work permit. So when I moved
Ah,
back to
okay.
India or for my vacation, I surrendered my work permit. And meanwhile, I was waiting for my new company to apply a new work permit for me so that I can come
Mm.
back to Singapore.
Ah, okay. So that one got rejected because of
Yeah,
unknown
yeah,
reasons.
yeah, exactly. So I just continued staying in Singapore. My lease was still ongoing. I was still paying rent for my place because I was hoping to get back, and I continued paying
Sure.
rent for a couple of months. I was in India still. Then I had to apply for a visitor's visa to get back, and that was very bitter for me. And I think that kind of left a bitter like a memory for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So then you came back and then you went to Mumbai to work there. So was there like any sort of like a strange feeling when you came back to work in your home country? I mean, it's still your home country. It's India. That's where you were born. You know the people and the language. But was it like a little strange to come back and work here?
100% was. My salary expectations were through the roof when you convert them to INR, right? Because I was
Mm,
getting paid
yeah.
in Singapore dollars, and my expectations was to get my return on investment on whatever I'd spent on my education, and it was unfair because I spent it in Singapore dollars, and I'm
Hmm.
expecting to make it back in Indian rupee, right? So that took a while, like for that mental adjustment, and then also I think I feel like I kept feeling like, I deserve better than this job offer. I deserve better than this job offer. So
Mm,
I did not take a few offers that came initially because I felt like I was overqualified for them. So that took 8 months of being unemployed. And before I got
mm,
an offer that I thought I was worthy of taking and which was in Mumbai. So then I
mm.
relocated to Mumbai.
Oh, okay, okay. So because of that bitter visa experience, was it like because of that you were hesitant to even move out of your country? Because I remember you saying that your sister insisted you to apply for the Canadian PR, the permanent residency, but you were not interested to do so. Why is that?
Yeah, when I got a job in Mumbai and I was happily working, knowing there are no visa issues hovering over my head anymore. My
Mhm.
sister had relocated on permanent residency to Canada at that time, and she insisted that I apply. And I was like, I am not going to put myself into those shoes anymore, because it's no matter how well you do, there's always a component of luck playing around, especially when it comes to all these applications, your permanent residency, your visa, work, right? You could be a really good candidate, but then you're still a foreigner in that country. So there's always that luck component which you don't want to rely on, because
Mhm.
right, it's not in your hands. But
Yeah.
she really insisted, and I thought, okay, fine, I'll just make her happy, I'll apply. And but I'm not going to move. I was very clear, I'm not going to move.
Mm.
But yeah, I nonchalantly applied, and then once I got it, I was like, she was like, you know what, you might as well move now since you've gotten it. And she kept telling me, now you're a PR, you won't have to move back, like you're gonna be fine. And then I was like,
Yeah.
okay, let's just move.
Yeah, that is like a ideal decision to make. If you got the permanent residency, why not to move? I know like so many people who can do anything to get the permanent residency, and you got it. So why not to move?
I think that's my previous experience was making me bitter about it, and it was only after I moved here and I met a couple people who were still on their student visas and they were, struggling to get converted to PR. That's when I realized, I should be very grateful to what has happened.
Hmm.
It certainly came in easy for me in a way, I can say it, but even moving on PR has its certain downsides. Like
Hmm.
there's always this gap, right, where you come in empty-handed, whatever,
Yeah.
like bit of savings, but they're never enough because you're going to be spending in CAD and you have INR in India, right?
Yeah.
And there's always this period where you're just desperately looking for jobs and applying
Hmm.
and then networking, and that's a stressful phase, and I had just gone through that in India because I had come back
Yeah.
from Singapore and I was doing all of that. So I kind of felt like I wasn't ready for it, but I had that cushion because my sister was here, so I stayed with her, didn't have to pay
Hmm.
rent for the initial months, and like had it easy for sure. I would say it, I definitely had it easier than a lot of people do. Yeah.
Okay. So you came in July 2019, I believe.
June
June
2019.
June 2019. So tell us about your first day. How was it? And did you come with a plan?
Yeah, the only plan was to get a job as soon as possible. As always, I think it's in our blood to just have
Yeah.
like, what's next, what's next? We cannot relax. So I came, I was kind of relaxed knowing I'm going to be staying with my sister. So there was no financial pressures as such, immediate
Hmm.
financial pressures.
Yeah.
But definitely, I started applying for full-time jobs for a month, just focusing solely on that. You talk to so many people when you come here, and you want to try every possible way that every person tells you, like,
Yeah.
their success story. So you want to apply every person's success story just to find out, yeah, maybe that would work for me.
Hmm.
But you would realize at the end that you will have your own success story at the end of it. It's going to
Hmm.
be a different story than anybody else. Like everybody has a unique story to tell, right?
Yeah.
But I was applying for full-time jobs, nothing came up. Then I was like, okay, you know what, I need to, probably lower my expectations, and I started applying for part-time jobs. And
Hmm.
then for part-time jobs, something really interesting worked out for me was I was applying for private tutoring roles, and
Hmm.
I wasn't sure if I'm going to get it because I didn't study in Canada. I had no experience working in Canada.
Hmm.
But apparently the university in Singapore is pretty recognized, and this tutoring agency's owner was from China as well. So he recognized the university and then gave me a chance. He interviewed me, and then it worked out, and I started tutoring university kids in my microeconomics and macroeconomics, which was my subject, and I always loved. So it did not um,
Yeah.
wasn't a whole lot of pressure. Started like that, taught for a couple months, and then meanwhile, full-time role at Scotiabank worked out for me as well. So I took that up, and that's how my journey began in Canada.
So you did talk about that you were seeing the stories of different people. So give us like some examples that something that one might look into and will not work for them. Somebody who's just coming into the country. Give us those examples if you can share.
Um, like everyone has their success story, and when I said that, I meant, some people will tell you that do not digress from whatever you whatever your education qualifications are. Do not look for anything outside that. Stick to it for a while, and you're going to find a
Mm-hmm.
job in your role. So, like for me, I was only applying for economist roles because I was so like tunnel visioned that I really
Mm-hmm.
want to just get into economics and I don't want to digress. And I heard people waiting 8, 9 months and then getting a role that they
Yeah.
always wanted. I think my priorities were kind of different in that sense that I wanted to immediately get something, get Canadian experience, and then on the, like continue looking for things that I wanted. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to it. I accepted a role in anti-money laundering field, which was
Mm-hmm.
not exactly even close to economics. But I'm happy I took that because I built my social network. I built my professional network. I
Mm-hmm.
started this job at Scotiabank. I moved out of my sister's house as well because I always wanted to live by myself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I mean that's what I meant, that you're going to find your own comfort level or your own preference in terms of what you want. Do you want to start working immediately? You are very persistent about getting the kind of role you want. So there's no one right or wrongs. I remember my sister often guiding me to say that, do not accept anything else other than economics. You've studied so
Mm-hmm.
much, do not lose that subject. And it has the
Yeah.
right intent, of course, but I don't think I wanted to wait for a year before I got a job. I would definitely have been depressed if I waited that long. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true that we come across a lot of like suggestions and advices, it's just because we are so desperate to, get into our own industries or just get a job. You keep on listening to people around you. But yeah, that is also true. It might work for you, but at the same time, everybody's journey is very like subject that I mean, I would say the next steps are very subjective. You cannot just copy whatever the other person did. You have to like figure out and kind of gauge your own motivations and own dreams and whether this can actually take you there or not. So yeah, it just takes a little bit of some time and a little bit of more planning before actually taking that action. Yeah.
100%. And I think your personality traits, you could be like, I would have tried to follow like XYZ steps. My personality trait would definitely,
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
mold those steps into a certain other direction and take me there.
Hmm.
So I think it's really important to believe in yourself or continue believing that whatever I bring, whatever skills I have, they will take me somewhere eventually.
Okay, so so how long did you do your Scotia Bank job?
I was there for 3 years. So basically, that was my first job as I moved
Hmm.
to Canada, and I was working there until I moved to the Yukon. So it was about 3 years, and I got promoted twice. But I think, constantly still kind of my heart was somewhere else. I loved
Hmm.
that job. It was very interesting. I had never worked in anti-money laundering. There was so much to learn, so much to see. I can't reveal too much about what we used to do, but it was definitely very interesting, and it was so practical. Like you hear about 9/11 attacks, you heard about so how the financial system helped those things, and how the
Hmm.
banks changed their policies after those attacks happened. So it was very interesting and insightful. But I think, like I said, my heart was always in economics. I was constantly yearning for that, and yeah.
Can you just share more insights about the whole process that you were telling about?
The anti-money laundering
Yep.
role that I was in. So basically, as anti-money laundering analysts, what we determine is to see if there's any money laundering happening in accounts, right? So I was working with Scotiabank, so we were looking into the accounts of Scotiabank customers just to see if there's any and money laundering concerns. And without speaking too much in details, because it's kind of like confidential processes that we
Hmm.
used to have, but the idea was essentially to any of these crimes which are associated with money laundering. Say, what is money laundering? It's basically any money that's coming from illegal activities, right? So we
Hmm.
used to look into signs. Like it's interesting how you can look into a bank accounts to see if there are any signs of money laundering in it. And the
Hmm.
activities we used to look for was, human trafficking, or it could be, like I said, terrorist financing, or any fraud related activities on the account. So very interesting role for sure.
Hmm. It does seem very fascinating, though. I would like to learn more about it. Since you said it's confidential, I would not nudge you to tell us more. I can keep that off the record. So let's just pivot towards your role in with the government of Yukon. So in the summer of 2022, you got the opportunity to work with the government of Yukon, where you are working as a fiscal economist. Tell us more about the role. But before that, tell us about the whole job search process. How did you get this job, and why Yukon? Because it's not the go-to traditional province, that immigrants choose to go to.
Okay, very interesting. And I think all of us kind of face that. It's just that, like, random Monday, you're working your regular job, and a Monday after work, you're like, I want to do something else. I want to make more money. I definitely don't deserve this much money. I want to hit this target. I By the end of this year, I want to be making this much money, right? So all of us
Hmm.
are going through those thoughts every once in a while.
Yeah.
So that would have happened, I'm sure. And on my LinkedIn, I have this always had this alert for any economist roles that come out in Canada,
Hmm.
across Canada. And uh, I bet, like, Fiscal Economist role came out, I would never pay too much attention to the geography because I was so, like I said, tunnel visioned about just
Hmm.
working as an economist. I look at the title, I read the description, I'm like, oh my God, that's my dream job. And I would just apply. And I would
Okay.
never think about what's going to happen, when am I going to move, how am I thought all those decisions were for later on. I just need to get through the interviews or even get through the learning of the interview process, right? That's the learning as well. I applied, must have applied. I bet. I don't remember applying for it.
Hmm.
And I applied. And then I was just thinking, what if this works out? It's Yukon. It sounds so exclusive. It sounds just so, who goes to the Yukon? And I remember
Yeah.
um, getting an email from them saying, "Oh, you've cleared, and we want to invite you for a technical round, like a technical written test." And I
Hmm.
was like, "What? I did not expect that to have happened through LinkedIn. I've never had any job interviews going through LinkedIn. Everybody
Hmm.
talks about how it works. It did for me. I never thought LinkedIn worked, honestly. And to everybody who's listening in, and who's been told to network through LinkedIn,
Yeah.
I never thought it worked because I did it for the longest time when I moved here. Reached out to people, met them for coffee chats, whatnot, and
Hmm.
had nothing worked out for me, at least, right? But yeah, 3 years later it did, and got the technical round. Very interestingly, like, all the odds were against me. The last day to submit the technical round was on the weekend when I was moving houses. So I
Okay.
literally, like, for 5 hours during the day, pack my stuff, patch up boxes, and then literally kept my computer system as is, just so I would be able to, like, finish my technical assessment at the end of the night. It was a 72-hour test. It was pretty technical, based on some laws and, like, fiscal policy numbers and all of that. But I submitted whatever, not overthinking again, and still worked out. It still happened. So I don't know if like I said, luck or destiny or whatever, but
Hmm.
it did work out.
So you were pretty comfortable moving to Yukon. That's what you were saying. That you were basically focusing on getting the job and not the location, right?
So when the time came to make the decision to move, because I had received the offer, salary was lucrative, amazing.
Hmm.
Like, everything was off the charts. Uh, I don't think I gave too much thought to it. I was just
Hmm.
like, yeah, I have to go. Like, there's no reason to not go. And it was a government job, salary was good. And I thought to myself, like, and that too only because, like, when I told people that, I got this job, I might move, and I did not really get positive reactions from even one person. It
Hmm.
was like, oh, are there even any people there? What do they do? Do they just grow potatoes there? What happens in the Yukon? How many? You're gonna die single. All of that. And
Yeah.
but like I said, the place was the least of concerns for me. Worst case, I told myself that if I cannot bear the cold and if it gets too lonely and depressing, I'm going to give it a year, 6 months of summer anyway, like 4 months of summer when I was moving. And I'll spend one winter. If it doesn't work out, I come back. And I still come back with government experience as work experience in the field of economics too. So I had
Exactly.
nothing to lose, literally nothing to lose.
So how is the living cost there?
Living cost is expensive. Rents are
Hmm.
not as cheap as one imagines living south of Canada, because you'd think that there's hardly any people. But interestingly, like, Yukon is huge in terms of, if you Google Yukon, you'd see, like, the size of the territory. It's pretty huge.
Yeah.
But of the 43,000 people, 33,000 people live in downtown. So it's a massive disproportionate, and it's also because all the remote communities are not as developed, or as like the public sector jobs are all, government jobs are all in the downtown itself. So
Hmm.
housing, there's a huge housing crisis, and I remember I'd still not been offered the role, but the director who I report to now, during the interview, he told me, like at the end of the interview, was like, let me just give you one piece of advice, that if you do go through this, if you do get this role, I would recommend that you would start looking for houses right away. And that was 3 months before I was expected to join, or like from the expected date of joining, 3 or 4 months
Hmm.
even, because he said everything else is amazing here. It's the housing crisis is real. And when I started looking for places, I experienced that housing crisis definitely is pretty bad, because everybody moves here for jobs. There's huge
Hmm.
immigration here, but they're not able to build as much because construction season is really short, like 3 months, 4 months during summers,
Hmm.
because winters are
Yeah.
minus 40. Workers cannot be working outside, right? So, yeah. In terms of food, they
Yeah.
have literally two highways which connects Yukon with rest of Canada, like BC and Alberta. And if anything happens on one of those highways, food prices just shoot up. And
Mm.
immediately there's only one superstore where you buy your groceries from, like for the entire Yukon. $1 ramen and one Canadian Tire.
Hmm.
So supply chain shortage, you can really see it immediately.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And do you get those Indian groceries? Because we guys always tend to look for those Indian groceries and Indian stuff. Do you get those here?
Yeah, yeah. Surprisingly, yes, there's a Walmart here, and they have a regular atta and Tata tea. Like, tea is life. You do not wake up without a
Yeah.
cup of tea. And
Hmm.
those are first few questions that I definitely asked in the Facebook groups before moving here. Like, how is the situation? Do you get this? Do you get that? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not bad. I get everything I need. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. So let's just talk a little bit more about your job. I remember you telling me that you do get to attend the legislative assemblies, which is not that easy to attend one in India. Tell us more about that.
So my role as fiscal economist is basically for the Yukon government to manage their revenue and expenses, right? Like, as what fiscal means, it's basically
Hmm.
managing expenses and revenues. So we forecast how much Yukon government is going to make in potential revenue, and where all it's going to be spent. And recently there was a change in some rebate policies. So a bill had to be passed. And I
Hmm.
work in the main building where all the politicians, because the legislative assembly is in the same building. So we see all the premier of Yukon and the opposition leader, uh, party leaders, and all very often, because they come and sit in the legislative assemblies, right? So there
Hmm.
was a bill that our team had worked on this summer, and that bill was being presented by the premier of the Yukon. And me and my team went to go see it live being presented,
Oh,
and the
wow.
opposition leader questioning it, and like asking for details. So it's really interesting, and definitely like the prime highlight of this year in terms of my career is yeah, to be able to see that live in front of us, because we've only seen it on TV or just heard of it, but
Exactly.
seeing it live was definitely, yeah.
Wow, that must be like a very enriching experience to actually see the bill coming in and then going through the final process. I'm sure it must be so fascinating.
Yeah, like from the point of us doing all the analysis, writing the final bill, premier presenting it, and it receiving a royal assent at the end of it all is
Hmm.
yeah, saw it from like ground to really come through. Yeah.
Okay, so Khushboo, if any of our listeners wants to get into this role, what kind of skills would be necessary?
There's one thing that I've really noticed. Yes, there was a technical assessment there, which I think is not as challenging. But what they really look for, and Yukon government is always hiring, and very accepting of people moving
Hmm.
in from south of Canada too. So recommend checking out the websites. We're always hiring. Is that they look at behavioral aspect of the candidate, 100%, and that's what I think I was most judged on, more than my technical skills, for sure. Like my education and all is on my resume, for sure, but they really see how fitting, because Yukon does not come without its challenges, right? Like
Mm,
the daylight that can really affect a person. So if
yeah.
they don't see that a person is like strong willed or is ready to just settle in or is very malleable, then I feel so basically behavioral, definitely more behavioral than technical.
So if any of our listeners is looking to get into such roles and want to reach out to Khushboo, I'll put the contact details in the show notes. Feel free to connect with her.
Absolutely happy to help. Yeah.
So let's just talk about your passion for outdoor sports. And I remember you saying in the beginning also that was like one of the driving forces for you. And we did talk about that a little bit, that it started in Singapore when you got into those marathons. So tell us all about those. How did you get into it? If any of our listeners want to get into it or just want to explore, how can one start?
Um, I feel like for me, it started off as just running with friends, like a set of friends, and we want to run together and also be healthy at the same time. That's how it started in Singapore. And definitely, I couldn't continue it as much when I was in India because, of course, the outdoor running is not as conducive. But
Yeah.
as soon as I got back, I moved here in Canada. I feel like running has always been like a de stressor for me. So, especially like in the initial 3, 4 months when I was applying for jobs, I made it a point to go out for like a 45-minute or an hour run. And
Mm.
here it's just so accessible. You literally run out of your building or, walk out of your house. There's all the pedestrian walkways which you can run on. They're not crowded
Yeah.
as much at all. And so those initial 4, 5 months, 3, 4 months, definitely I was running pretty much every day. And once I got a job, it slowed down a bit. But then again, it helped
Mhm.
that my roommates used to like running too. So three of us used to go for runs after work, like at
Mhm.
least 3 to 4 times a week again. So it kind of continued. And because of COVID, I could not really run any marathons, but Scotiabank Waterfront used to be was the marathon I really wanted to run. And when I just moved,
Mhm.
I saw it was going to happen in October. But I was like, no, I need to find a job first before I can sign up for the $120 run. I
Yeah.
cannot afford that. But next 2 years there were no marathons because of COVID. And
COVID.
just before moving to Yukon, I did run the Toronto half marathon. And I make it a point that after coming back from a marathon, I sign up for the next one so that, the
Mhm.
momentum keeps going. And I
Yeah.
knew I was moving to the Yukon and I was looking up for marathons in the Yukon. And then I ended up signing for one even before I moved here.
Oh
And
wow.
that was very funny because I'm so used to running on a road, like because Singapore was flat and then Toronto Mississauga is pretty flat as well. And I just signed up for a trail half marathon, and without knowing much about what trail running is, I
Yeah.
come here. Trail running is literally running up and down mountains for the same distance. So it was
Mm.
so hardcore. I came here feeling all proud that, yeah, I'm a runner, I can run. And I remember going for the first run and I was running on the edge of the mountain. It's literally where it falls right on my left. Like it's just this bit of narrow
Oh man.
um, trail which you run on, and you run 21 kilometers up and down, and it was crazy. But once I did that, I knew that was my next passion, to get better at trail running. And I ran 3 half marathons ever since I've moved to the Yukon on, yeah, trail running too. So amazing, it's been amazing.
Oh, that seems tiring though.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, but it is addictive. It's an addiction. Once you get addicted, then there's just no looking back.
So I did see in one of your, posts. I was just scrolling through your feed, and I saw that you mentioned beer spray. I mean, not beer. I always get trouble with this word. Bear spray,
Best.
balu, bear, bear spray. So do you actually encounter them on your treks?
Yeah, I have very like say 20, 30 meters away from me.
Oh.
Me and my friend were going. We were on a trail run. We had gone after work, and we always carry bear sprays. Like that's a necessity, especially if you're running on trails. So trails is basically running on a mountain within a forest, right? And that's where all the bears hang out too. Yukon and
Mhm.
Alaska are known to be like, bear country. You would see signs everywhere like bear safety
Mhm.
is important here in a bear country. So that's the first thing I got when I moved here was a bear spray. And yeah, we always run with it. Like you have water bottle in one pocket of your vest and a bear spray in the other pocket of your vest, because
Mhm.
that's absolutely necessary. And I did come across one, and they tell you to not run back as soon as you see it, but that's your first reaction, right? So I look at it, me and
Yeah.
my friend, and I start running back. She's like, "Don't run!" I was like, "Ooh, yikes! Okay, yeah, I gotta remember that." And that was the first time I actually took out my bear spray, and there's a safety lid on it. So I took off the safety lid and I literally had it up like in front of my face, in case I had to spray it because the bear
Mhm.
was so close. So yeah, it happens. And you see bear poop everywhere. You,
Mhm.
and those are the things you have to look out for when you're trail running, especially by yourself, to
Mhm.
have constantly be on a lookout for either bear prints, and bear poop. Yeah. And I have come across quite a few as I was training for my marathons.
So what do you do if you don't run? I mean, that's the very instant reaction, right? So what do you do if you don't have to run?
There are a few steps. You make sure you keep your bear spray ready. You are supposed to be facing the bear, but you can start walking back slowly,
Okay.
so that the bear doesn't think you're a threat. And bears usually attack as a defense, unless, of
Mhm.
course, like there's one-off chance that they're aggressive, but
Yeah.
they tend to attack in a defense. So walk back, but look them in the eye, and keep your bear spray ready. Those are a
Mhm.
few steps. Or But there are training workshops here for on bear safety, which are offered
Oh,
free
okay.
by Yukon government and stuff. So definitely, yeah, comes in handy for all these.
Yeah, if that is so commonly you're just coming across them, a training has to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these were some of the things which are so exotic and interesting when I moved here. It's like, okay, these are
Hmm.
some ways of living, right? You carry your bear spray everywhere you go.
So another post I saw, Khushboo, was with the caption that, learning not to overmine my existence. Look just how small we are. And this was the picture clicked from a distance where you are looking so tiny in it with beautiful scenery behind you. And it reminded me of the conversation we had, that how these outdoor activities keeps you grounded. Do you want to share your perspective on that?
It's a very recent post. It was the first time, it was my first winter trek. I was minus 30 that day. And I had promised myself that the only way to beat winter blues here is to just be outdoors, just go outdoors, regardless of the
Hmm.
weather or temperature, right? So I'd gone out that day, and I think that's what mountains do to you. Like, you can be on top of a hill or top of a mountain, you look around 360-degree view, literally
Hmm.
like eagle eye view, and you just realize that nature is huge, nature is grand, and like we as humans are nothing.
Yeah.
All that me, myself, I like to do this, I like to do that. It just wears off you, like, as like sweat from your body wears out,
Hmm.
literally does that. And these past couple months, like it's been 7 6 7 7 yeah, more than 6 months that I moved here.
Hmm.
Every trek, every hike, every summit that I have accomplished here has, like, taken down those me and my's, bit by bit, and it's still in a process. But each day I just want to be like, yeah, nature's majestic, nature's grand, and
Hmm.
just want to be close to nature, and all these other worldly desires, they are dissipating slowly. I sound like a monk, and some of my friends think I'm becoming a monk. But it's just Yukon, it did that to me.
Hmm. No, you're right. That's what we were discussing in our previous conversation, right? That this is like you are really not in. You are actually in the real world. Otherwise, what we see on social media, you kind of desire to do what the other people are doing on the social media, right? But in here, you are in the real world. You see that all that is nothing, right? You just have your own. Sometimes you do get into that ego and that phase of that. Oh, I have this. I know this. I know that, but nothing. That picture, you are really a tiny speck in the big galaxy. So what is all that ego for? Nothing.
Yeah, 100%. I have forgotten the ways of living in a city where you're like, I need a new outfit, I need new
Mhm.
makeup, I need this handbag, Black Friday
Really?
sales coming. None of that. Every time it's just like, what new gear I need to buy?
Oh, wow.
I need snowshoes. I want, like, just day before yesterday, it's my new winter challenge. I am gonna learn skiing, so I went and bought all the ski gear, and that's good. That's my next challenge for like the coming 4 months.
Awesome. Love that. Okay, Khushboo, so now we are in the final segment of the podcast. I call it Beneath the Accent. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. You can answer them in one word or a sentence or howsoever you feel like. The idea is just to know more about you.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So, what advice would you like to give to Khushboo, who has just landed in Canada?
You are going to find the job you want. Just trust yourself. Just trust yourself.
If you had to describe yourself as an animal or any creature, what would it be and why?
I have thought about it a few times. What animal would I want to be? And I want to be. And recently, I was having this conversation with a friend. So, Yukon's territorial bird is raven, and
Hmm.
most of us have only heard of ravens in Game of Thrones. And we
Hmm.
didn't. I didn't know for the longest time ravens really existed. I'd want to be a raven. Raven, smartest birds. They look like crows, but they're like thrice the size of a crow, and they can imitate any sound that they hear in the environment. Any sound that they hear. I want to be a raven. Fly over mountains.
That's very intriguing. So, the next question, I think the answer to the next question I know, but I think I'll still ask. What's the one habit you adopted that has changed your life?
Running has to be running.
You read my mind, yeah.
it has it has built lot of endurance and mental strength, and I apply that strength to my daily life. Like, you're running, you're running, you're out of breath, you feel dizzy, and you go past that feeling for even 5 minutes. And if you apply that strength in your daily life, it can really be like life
Hmm.
changing. So has to be running. Yeah.
I love that. So, what's the most expensive thing you own?
Okay, it's a backpacking tent. Backpacking tents are supposed to be lightweight because you're carrying a backpack for like 4 days or 5 days, right?
Yeah.
You're trekking for like whatever 20 kilometers a day. It's a $700 tent,
Hmm.
and I just bought it in summers. It's the most lightweight tent, and it's my most prized possession.
Okay. So, what's the most expensive thing you'd like to own?
I want this. There's so many things. It's all hiking gear. It's always hiking gear. Like, I'm
Sure.
just upgrading my stuff every time. But I'm looking for a Patagonia jacket, and it's $450, and saving money for that. That's my next, because it's absolutely windproof, super lightweight, and perfect for hikes. Again, hikes. Sorry, guys. This is all
Mm.
about hikes.
No, sure. You don't have to be sorry. That's, I think, that's your personality, right? Now, this hiking is part
Yeah.
of you, so you don't have to say sorry about that.
Yeah.
So, name three things from your bucket list.
Okay, interesting. Always wanted to do Everest, and because summiting Everest is expensive affair, I'd
Mm.
be happy with the base camp too. So that's definitely something I want to do. Bucket list was owning a car, which I did when I moved to the Yukon. So that has
Okay.
happened. Always loved driving. Always loved being independent. Independent, which comes with driving. So that's happening. What else is on the bucket list? It changes every year. Like, I was living in India and my bucket list was something. And then I moved to Canada. My bucket list was like, whoa, we can do this as well. Now my bucket list is this. And then
Mm.
I moved here and I'm like, wow, there's so much more I can do. Now there's a lot of bucket list hikes that I want to do. But yeah, those two definitely were. One was primary getting a car, which I did, and then Everest Base Camp someday.
Okay. So, which is the other one, which is like on your bucket list? Which other hike? Which part of the country or which other country? Which place?
So there's a Chilkoot Trail here. Just a very bit of history on Yukon. Yukon was formed because there was a gold rush here. So they found gold in one of the creeks or rivers here, and somebody found out. They sent letters. This was in 1800s, and then the population here became 100,000. So at that point, the government or whatever the people here, they wanted a different territory, separate territory. That's when Yukon was formed. So when the Yukon was formed and there was gold rush, a lot of people from Alaska or BC,
Hmm.
south of Yukon, they started migrating up in search of gold. And there's this very famous route called Chilkoot, which thousands of people died because they were traversing that in the winters just in search of gold and money. Now it
Mm.
has become a historic trail which people hike or even run. It's a 60-kilometer trek or distance. So that's a bucket list. I really want to do that because I feel like that's very historic and very of a lot of importance to Yukon's history. So
Hmm.
I definitely want to hike that. Takes 4 6 days to hike the whole thing, and yeah, that's my bucket
Okay.
list hike for next year.
We will talk again, I'll call you again on the podcast. We have to know the experience of that trail.
Absolutely, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. So who's your go-to person, Khushbu?
I'm not gonna lie, I have a very big social circle and I am a social bird. I will not say that I pride in being a solo rider and I solve my problems on my own. I don't do that. No, I have a lot of trustworthy friends and my siblings definitely.
Mhm.
So there's a very close knit of friends that I always reach out to every time I'm feeling something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I definitely want a lot of superpowers, but it would be to uh, it would be to bear uh, be able to bear a lot of pain if I can, like the physical pain. Be able to
Okay.
bear every physical pain possible. Yeah,
Interesting.
because that's the only thing that makes me weak, and I don't want to feel
Hmm.
weak. So yeah.
Okay. So finally describe Canada in one word or a sentence.
So British Columbia's tagline is "Beautiful British Columbia." I think it's beautiful Canada, hands down, beautiful
Hmm.
Canada.
Undoubtedly. So, on that note, Khushbu, those are all my questions. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing your journey, sharing your story, and adding value to my listeners. Thank you.
It was all my pleasure to be able to speak to you, Gursis. You brought the best in me. You brought, yeah. Thank you for all the questions.
I can't tell you how glad I am to hear that. So, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Thanks a lot.
All truth.
Hey, listener, thank you for making it to the end. I highly, highly appreciate you listening the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't as yet, and please share with your friends or anybody you think would like it. And like I always say, we encourage you to follow your heart, but also us on Instagram. The handle is mythicaccent. You can also leave us a review or write to us at hello@mythicaccent.com. So stay tuned and let's continue knowing each other beneath the accent.